chapter 10, verses 17 and 18, which reads, "Therefore my Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. This command I have received from my Father." So Friday, I spoke on this, and we remembered together Jesus laying down his life, and no one could take it. He and only he had the power to lay it down. Today, I want to talk about the second part of his mission. I want to talk about the completion of his mission. Well, the completion of that part of his mission, where he said, I laid down my life that I may take it again. So I need to talk about that. And because of that, I'm going to repeat a lot of what I said on Friday. But Friday was a very short message, so it's not a lot really. But the deal is, for those who are here, I apologize, bear with me. But I think it's worth repeating anyway, so that I can get to the point I really want to make. So I really want to focus on, the emphasis is going to be that line, I lay down my life that I may take it again. Right? So, that's the emphasis. The point that Jesus, and only Jesus, could lay down his life. Right? And I reminded us on Friday that there were several occasions where other people tried to take his life. And I needed to read these verses out just to remind us. So I read it from John 8:59. They took up stones to throw at him, but he simply walked through the midst of them. Interestingly, this started in the temple. If you follow that passage and go to the beginning, it's Jesus in the temple, and he riled them up. They got so furious with him, they grabbed him and they wanted to stone him. But when they got him to a place where they could stone him, they couldn't take his life. He simply, just calmly, coolly walked out the midst of them. In John 10:39, a crowd went to seize him. Again, it started in the temple. The crowd was so angry with him that they seized him. And again, they couldn't take his life, so they had no power or control. So he just simply walked out of the midst of them. Again, in the temple. The temple, the place we're trying to get people to come. But one of my favorites is Luke 4:28-30, and I'm going to read this right now. So all those in the synagogue, interestingly, the synagogue, the temple, the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath, and rose up and thrust him out of the city, and they led him to the brow of the hill on which their city was built, that they might throw him down over the cliff. And when they got to that point, that's me, then passing through the midst of them, he went his way. So they got him to the point where they're going to throw him over a cliff, and all of a sudden, he just walks past them. I read these verses, and there's others to emphasize that only he had the power to take his life, to lay down his life. And we need to remember that. He came to lay down his life. He came to die on the cross. He came to pay the penalty accrued by the sheep, the children of God. Okay? That was his purpose. That's the reason he came. So he had power over all of that. That was his mission. And nobody could interrupt him. Because he had the power, right? He said it. In 2 Corinthians 5:21, it says, "For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him." He came to pay the price in full. And what I find interesting about this verse is that, because it starts, that first sentence says, "For he," speaking about God the Father, "he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us." And the last part of that phrase is, "For he," Father, and the last bit was, "for us." He did this for us. Another example of the depth of the love of God, the love that God has for each and every. He knew him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. Notice, he made him. Another revelation of the work of the cross was all of God. Literally all of God. Now, it's another one of those times, and I seem to be running into them regularly, when the scriptures are beyond my ability to give justice to the subject. You know what I'm saying? Now, this is a powerful verse we have here. But notice, it didn't say he became a sinner. He became sin. Now, this is the bit that I'm not intellectual, I'm not smart enough to have the right vocabulary to explain that. But I can share what I know. That he never became a sinner, but he became sin. Some intellectuals say he became a sin offering. You know, the goats, they laid hands on them, and one was sent in the wilderness and one was executed. There's some people that think he became the sin offering. But it says here, the sinless one became sin. He did not become a sinner, he became sin. He was never guilty, yet he had to pay the full price of our guilt. Now, in my heart, I sort of understand that, and I'm so appreciative of it, but my head can't put the words together to communicate the power of that truth. He didn't become a sinner, but he became sin. I haven't got the ability to explain or to present the image that we need right now to get that. He was never guilty, yet he paid the full penalty of our guilt. For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us. It's just another revelation of the depth of the love of God. How much God has loved us. And the price he paid to have us close to him. John 10:17 we read, therefore my Father loves me because I lay down my life that I may take it again. So we say, he laid down his life to pay the penalty of our sin. And rightfully so. We say that correctly, and it's the truth. But when Jesus says it, I need to emphasize, when Jesus says it, he says a little bit differently. He said, I lay down my life that I may take it up again. I think he's saying the death isn't enough. There needs to be more. The death we celebrate Friday. And we understand that he laid down his life and he paid the penalty of our sin, that by the washing of his blood, all of us can be free of that debt. All of us can be cleansed of sin. All of us can come into boldly and confidently into the presence of God, because there's nothing for us to be ashamed about. There's nothing for us that God can look and say you're guilty, because his son did it all for us, right? We understand that. But now with Jesus saying, okay, that's in place, but there has to be more. So I'm literally going to die so I can be raised. I've never quite looked at it like that. Jesus said, I'm going to die so that I can be raised. So we can say he laid down his life to pay the penalty of sin, and it's absolutely correct. But he says, I'm going to die so I can be raised again. I'll lay my life down so that I can pick it back up again. And he goes on to say how he has the power to do that. I have the power to lay my life down. I have the power to take my life up. This is the bit I think that I need to emphasize this morning. He rose from the dead, not only to fulfill the prophecy confirming who he was, not only to fulfill all the promises that were made based on that, but to reveal the power and the authority he had over death. I'm starting to say, yeah, there's a lot involved, and I'm not excluding or pushing anything out, but I believe he died so he could display his power to live. Sometimes, he revealed his power and his authority over death, if you like, breaking the fear of this or the sting of death, and ensuring the ultimate victory for the children of God. The ultimate victory being over sin and over death. So he died to pay the price, but he rose again to reveal his power and authority. He rose again to show that he does have the power and the authority over sin and death. So he said, that's the whole package. We split it in two. We celebrate the cross. And some emphasize the cross. But then we put it in a different package, the resurrection. And some emphasize the resurrection. But the deal is, Jesus said, they're together. They're part of the same deal. I've done this so I can do this. I had to go through that so I can accomplish this. But sometimes we inadvertently paint a picture of a great battle between life and death, between righteousness and evil, between Christ and Satan. In fact, I remember not long after I was first saved, I heard an evangelist tell a wonderful story. And when I was working with street kids, we used to go on a camp, and I used this story often to try and influence the children into making decisions for Christ. But I talked about, when Jesus died, and because he was dead, he was taken to hell. And in hell, they were celebrating. Can I do the actions as well? I don't know if I still remember them all. But I used to really, really lay it on thick. So here we are. All Satan and all the demons, all celebrating, having a party, high-fiving, drinking Jim Beam. Any Jim Beam drinkers here? Whiskey, gin. Anyway, they're all having this full-on party, listening to AC/DC. We're on the high. Anyway, you know that one. They're just playing, turn it up loud. They're celebrating really big time. And there's a huge crowd. Satan's in the middle. The head demons are around him. And then the ranks are back off. But right at the very back of the ranks, all of a sudden, one little demon hears a little bit of noise. So he stops to turn around and check out this noise coming from the depths of hell. And then there's a little bit of a light. So he goes over to look, and before he knows it, he's bang. And then everybody becomes aware of the noise. And everybody becomes, until the party falls silent. And everybody, including Satan, are starting to worry and tremble. Because they see this light that's now causing their eyes pain. It's so bright, and it's coming until eventually stood right in the middle of them is Christ, who deals the death blow. Bang, nails the sucker really good, flattens him. Right, so I used to tell that story, and we'd have a bonfire going on, and we'd have all the actions, and the kids would get involved and start cheering, and then I'd go on to say how wonderful Jesus is, and he died for them, but look how powerful he is, how mighty he is, how cool he is. He's like, just lay it on really thick as I could. But the truth was, there was never, ever anything even remotely like a fight. Jesus was never, ever, ever out of control. They never did anything to Jesus except what he allowed. Can you get the point? Here I need more words and more phrases to say it wasn't even close to a competition. It wasn't at any stage at all did they have any kind of power or authority over Jesus. Not once. He said, I have the power to lay my life down. I have the power to raise it up again. Nobody else had that power. He had that power. So when they thought that they were in control, when they thought that they had power and authority, when they thought that they were really all the time. Does anybody remember Carmen? Singer, entertainer. He did this song one time, and he did these wonderful songs, and in his song he'd put a little skit together, and there was this fight, which now is meaningless to me, but he had this fight, and it was like the match of the universe, the greatest bout of all time, and it was Satan and Jesus, and then all of a sudden Satan swings a blow and knocks Jesus down, and Jesus is lying down, and of course the great referee is the Father, And so everybody's looking at Jesus, knocked out, Satan's celebrating. But then the Father goes, 10 instead of 1. You know how they count them out? Well, in this skit, they count them backwards. 9, 8. And they're going, wait a minute, that's not how we do it. Instead of going, you know what, and then you're out. Well, 10, 9, because of course we know that this isn't the end, but Jesus is coming back. It's a countdown to it. But the deal was, and I get the truth, and that was great, and I really enjoyed that. I got most of my theology from Carmen, Don Francisco. Who remembers him? There was other couple of guys about the same era. I got nearly all my theology from them. But anyway, but the deal was, there was never ever a single moment when the devil or even evil men had any control or influence or authority or power over Jesus, ever. We need to understand that. It was all planned. He said, I'm going to do this so I can do this. I'm going to go through this and allow this so I can get to here. We often don't believe it, but the way we present Easter, oftentimes we portray that there's some kind of a battle, some kind of a wrestle going on here. But there never ever was. Trying to compare, now don't get me wrong, Satan and his demons do have authority because we give it to them, right? I believe that with all my heart. But comparing it to the power and authority of Jesus is like taking a drop from an eyedropper and comparing it to the oceans of the world. Even then, that's overrated. You hear what I'm saying? There's no comparison. How can anything that's created have power over the Creator? You can't even compare them. But we inadvertently think that there was a fight, there was a wrestle, there was some kind of a war. But there wasn't. He was in full control. He had all the authority. He had all the power. So in 1 Peter 3, 18 and 19, he tells us, you know, when it says Jesus died and then he was in the tomb for 3 days. Ephesians 4, I think it is, says that he ascended. Was it 3, 2, 3 or 4? Anyway, it's in Ephesians somewhere. The Ephesians says that he descended into hell, right? But this is what Peter had a revelation and tells us what happened. 1 Peter 3, 18 and 19. For Christ also suffered once for sin, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, by whom also he went and preached to the spirits in prison. The deal is, he only ascended so that he could declare his power and authority over the demonic realm, over the whole spiritual realm. There was no battle, there was no wrestle. He went in power and authority. And he told them what it's going to be and what it is. And they heard him and they had to. They had no option because he had all the power, all the authority. Now, who knows and believes all that? Everybody, one of us, all of us, most of us? Well, praise God. Now that should influence the way we think, the way we even pray, the way we talk, the way we act. The thing is this. We think about the false accusations. We think about the corrupt trial. We think about the beatings, the brutality of it, the pain and the suffering of it. We think about the crown of thorns. We think about the humiliation. We think about the blasphemy, the incredible suffering. We think about the cross. We think about the nails. Him carrying that thing to the point where he's exhausted and he couldn't, and they got somebody else to do it. We think about him literally nailed to a cross, and then the cross being lifted up and dropped in a hole, and the pain as the cross is, as his weight falls now on those nails that they've holding to the cross. We think about that. We think about the suffering. We think about the fact that the Romans were specialists in this and could keep people alive for days on a cross. And the way they would take a shortcut to kill them was just to basically break their legs so they couldn't push themselves up on the weight of that nail and take a breath, because they'd be hanging there and they'd literally suffocate because of the pressure across their chest. They couldn't breathe. And that was a shortcut. So they could technically keep someone alive for days up on that cross. We think about the spear in the side and the blood and the water. We think about all of that stuff, right? And because of that, we think Satan had some spiritual, or the spiritual host had some kind of power and authority over him right then. We think that it looks like evil men had power over him. But the truth is, never once did he lose control. He and only he had the power to lay down his life, and he proved it when he took up his life again. He proved his power and authority. He rose from the dead, not only to fulfill the prophecies concerning him, that who he was, and to fulfill the promises, but to reveal the power and authority over death. Breaking the power, I've said it before, breaking the fear and the sting of death, and ensuring the ultimate victory for all his children over sin and death. Now, in Hebrews 4:15, we read this: "For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weakness, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin." So through his life, Jesus went through everything that we go through, yet he didn't fail. Every time we stumbled, he took the same test and didn't stumble. Every time we were tempted, he was tempted, but he didn't fall to that temptation. Every sin, every temptation, every trial, everything that caused us to sin, he went through exactly the same thing, but never failed. It was part of preparation, of course, for laying his life down. He had to go through everything that we go through. So I suspect, and I haven't got the time since I saw this, nor probably have I got the intellectual power to do this, but I suspect that every single thing every aspect, from the garden, the false accusations, the rigged court, the injustice of it all, right through to every physical abuse he suffered, right through to the mental abuse he suffered, the spiritual agony he went through. Every aspect of that death was done for a reason. And I believe somehow, I can't prove this is just my thoughts, I believe that everything he went to, everything that was allowed to happen to him, was done for our benefit. There's something in what he went through that was the undoing of what we endured. Now, I can't prove that yet. But based on Hebrews 4:15, as he lived his life, he was tempted in every way. And so I think he died in every way that was necessary for our benefit. In every way that we needed to be paid a price, or needed to be healed or delivered from. Everything that was done, he undid it in his suffering on the cross. That whole thing. That's my conviction. I believe he was in full control, and it wasn't just the rage of people, the wickedness of people, the scheming of demonic hosts influencing. It wasn't any of that. I believe every aspect of his death was for reason and for purpose, for our benefit. So rather than looking at that and then deducing, well, that's because Satan or demonic hosts had power and authority over him at that time, we go, no. Well, that's because evil men had power. No. All he went through was because he had a plan and a purpose. Everything he endured was for our benefit. And I can't do it, but I suspect every detail relates to something in our lives And by him enduring that, set us free from it. So right now, with those thoughts of his triumph, thoughts of his victory, thoughts of the power and authority in his life, I'm suggesting we should take communion right now. Which normally, as we take the wafer, represents his life, his body that was broken for us. Every now and again you get one of those awkward ones that doesn't want to open. And you're terrified of spilling juice all down your shirt. Am I the only one? I have been accused of being a bit clumsy by people who aren't here today. Now normally we take this and we remember the body broken. But let's remember it was broken for a reason and a purpose, for our benefit. Let's eat together thinking about that. Now let's think about the juice that represents the blood that was shed for the forgiveness of our sins. So it was Jesus deliberately. It wasn't an accidental slashing out. It was him deliberately, intentionally pouring out for our benefit. Let's drink it thinking like that. Thank you, Lord. Can I have the team back in right now? It's harder for us when we think about the betrayal, the suffering, the agony, everything. It's hard for us to celebrate that. But we need to remember he did it deliberately, intentionally for us. A lot of people, we need healing because of the sins of our life. Some of us need actually deliverance because we're enslaved by it and in bondage to it. So some need healing, some need deliverance. We all need cleansing. So we could think and regret and mourn, do a dirge. I want to do that one, I think it's the middle one. It might have been the first one, I can't remember. Yeah. Victory over sin thing. Anyway, but I think we need to get to a place where we see his great love, we see his kindness, we see him deliberately, intentionally going through every minute detail specifically for our benefit, and we ought to be really glad about that. Jesus himself, it says in Hebrews, for the joy that was set before him, endured the shame of the cross. The joy set before him was the benefits of what he did. His children, his sheep reconciled back. The children reconciled back to the Father, making a way for the Father to connect with the sons and daughters again. I think right now I'd like to do one of these songs in celebration of that truth and that reality. And as we come to terms with that, I don't even know if it was the first one. Am I messing you up? Am I testing you, trialing you? Are you getting angry with me? They all said no, but you said yes. Anyway, anyone you choose, I'd like to do it as a declaration of our faith, as a praise of adoration, in us beginning to really comprehend what he did and why he did it. And the bottom line is he loved his children so much. He loved us so much. And while Jesus had the power and the authority, he said in this passage that, because I've got these instructions from my Father, Father loves so much. Let's stand together and be surprised as we sing this.